Hidden on the outskirts of a mid-sized American city lay the pristine suburban development of Riverbend Grove. Stately homes lined winding streets, each house nearly identical in style and color. Perfectly trimmed lawns and matching mailbox posts gave the sense of orderly calm. Behind the facade of uniform beauty operated the Riverbend Grove Homeowners Association, an institution whose bylaws and committees ensured that every shrub remained at an approved height and every trash can was hidden exactly on schedule. In principle, the HOA existed to keep property values high and public spaces neat. In practice, its impact depended heavily on who held power within it. Unfortunately for many residents, the current board included a middle-aged woman named Melanie Farnett, though neighbors privately dubbed her Karen. Melanie, or Karen, as most called her in hushed annoyance, was in her mid-50s, her short hair always impeccably styled. She favored collared blouses and a crisp expression that suggested perpetual disapproval. On her daily rounds, clipboard in hand, she surveyed lawns and cars, mailboxes and porch decor. Any slight deviation, a child's bicycle leaning in a yard, a lawn ornament too tall, resulted in a sharp knock at the door or an official violation notice. In the years since Melanie Farnett took charge of the HOA's Compliance and Aesthetics Committee, the tension in Riverbend Grove grew steadily. Many residents found themselves slapped with petty fines over inconsequential matters. Some tried to reason with her, but Karen insisted she enforced rules fairly, with a self-righteous flair that left folks exasperated. Those who resisted discovered she had an uncanny ability to interpret vague bylaws in the strictest possible ways. Despite this, life in Riverbend Grove continued peacefully enough for most families. The community boasted a large central playground, Chestnut Corner, where children often gathered after school to run around or paint on large sheets of butcher paper. A few parents volunteered to supervise these creative sessions, bringing non-toxic paints so kids could dabble in simple crafts. For the children, it was a place of color and laughter. But for Karen, it increasingly became a source of irritation. She disliked the scattered paint cups, the giggles that carried beyond the official quiet hours. She believed that letting children paint outdoors risked splatters or leftover cups messing up the neat environment. If they wanted to do art, they could do it in approved indoor facilities, not in the public square for all to see. Still, for months, Karen had found no explicit rule to ban child art gatherings at Chestnut Corner. The best she could do was grumble about potential litter or ask that they remove any leftover water promptly. The parents, well aware of her hostility, ensured they left the space cleaner than before, wiping tables, storing supplies properly. They hoped that by showing good manners, they'd keep Karen at bay. Yet inside Karen's mind, frustration simmered each time she passed the playground and saw little kids squealing with delight as they brandished paintbrushes. A quiet part of her fumed. They're making a scene, cluttering up the place with their improvised crafts. She told herself she was only concerned about aesthetics and safety, though deeper motivations, perhaps annoyance at unrestrained joy, bubbled beneath. She bided her time, waiting for an excuse. Then one drizzly afternoon, an opportunity arose that would let Karen lash out in a shockingly destructive way, forcing the entire neighborhood to confront just how far she'd go to impose her brand of order. In Riverbend Grove, after school let out, a cluster of children often trotted to Chestnut Corner, where a shady picnic table invited them to create finger paintings, watercolors, or chalk drawings. Laura Bryant, a gentle-voiced mother of two, led these sessions. She carted in trays of harmless, washable paints, large plastic cups for rinsing brushes, and big sheets of paper. Sometimes, older kids worked on more detailed sketches or group murals. Younger children giggled as they smeared bright hues across the page. Parents took turns supervising, ensuring no one wandered off or ate paint. They also made sure to store leftover water or paint cups in sealed containers for disposal at home. The kids learned a bit of craft etiquette, like cleaning brushes or disposing of used water properly. The result was a harmonious routine, an hour or two of creative fun, culminating in a tidy cleanup. Melanie Farnett, however, had begun complaining. "It's a public area, not an art studio," she'd say to any parent in earshot. She fumed that the children's laughter sometimes escalated to squeals, that the breeze might blow a stray paint-splashed paper onto the grass, or that leftover water cups might attract bugs. The parents assured her they took precautions, but Karen insisted that she saw dribbles of color near the bench in the presence of unmonitored minors. It didn't matter that at least one adult was always present. In her mind, it was still chaotic. One Wednesday, as a drizzle threatened overhead, Laura told the kids they'd do a shortened session, painting quickly before the rain. They finished up just in time, packing away their tools. The last step was pouring out the brush rinse water, which they typically did in the designated sink inside the small caretaker's shed. But that day, the caretaker was absent and the shed locked. So Laura sealed the used paint water in a plastic container, intending to toss it at home. Unbeknownst to them, Karen had been lurking nearby, scowling at the scene. She saw the parents sealing up the water container, muttered under her breath about waste disposal. But for once, the parents had left no opening to criticize. They had followed every precaution. The kids packed up, trotting off under umbrellas, leaving the area clean. Karen left in annoyance, her desire to penalize them thwarted yet again. But a deeper resentment gnawed at Karen. These parents think they're so careful, always abiding by the letter of the rules. Perhaps it's time they learn their activities are not truly welcome. She devised a plan, spurred by the leftover water's presence. If she could present the paint water as an environmental or safety hazard, maybe the HOA would crack down. But she needed something more dramatic to drive the point home. As the days rolled on, Karen Farnett simmered, resentful that the children's art circle continued unabated. She'd tried petty complaints, but the parents meticulously complied with each minor rule. No spilled paint marred the pavement. No loud fiascos justified an official ban. She realized if she wanted the board to take action, she needed a bigger incident. One late afternoon, Karen rummaged in her garage. She had been repainting some shutters with strong oil-based paint and had a bucket containing leftover cleaning water, mixed with paint thinner residue. The bucket was labeled toxic, do not dump, a caution for disposal at a hazardous waste site. But as she stared at it, a twisted idea formed in her mind. If some of this water ended up near the children's play area, well, that would be a real hazard. Then I could show everyone how these paint activities are dangerous. It was a shocking leap, but Karen rationalized it as a forced demonstration. The board must see the problem. I'll show them how paint residue can pollute or harm kids. She assured herself no one would be badly hurt. She'd just pour a small amount onto the ground, enough to cause a stir and justify more stringent rules. Then the parents would be forced to move their messy art sessions elsewhere, or, ideally, cancel them. That night, after sunset, Karen drove to the community playground with the bucket in her trunk. The sky was dark, and the area was deserted. She parked near a corner, scanning for witnesses. Heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and self-justification, she slipped out, grabbed the bucket, and crept toward the edge of the playground, where the kids usually set their big sheets on the grass for painting. Under a dim street lamp, she pried the lid off the bucket, wrinkling her nose at the chemical smell. I'll just pour enough to cause discoloration or a stench. That'll scare them off. She told herself no child would be present at this hour. Carefully, she tipped the bucket, letting a swirl of paint thinner-laced water slosh onto the soil. A harsh odor drifted upward. She shivered. Maybe a bit more, so it's undeniable. She poured enough to form a small muddy puddle. Then, replacing the lid, she hurried back to her car, driving off before anyone spotted her. She planned to return in the morning to discover the contamination and raise alarm, blaming the children's art group or the caretaker's negligence. Let's see how they like that, she thought. Little did she realize that her act was far more reckless than she'd anticipated. The old paint thinner was quite toxic, and the quantity she'd dumped could indeed harm local plants or pose a hazard if a child encountered it. She also hadn't considered that the playground ground cover had limited drainage, meaning the chemicals might linger. Her single-minded drive to sabotage overshadowed basic safety considerations. Thus, in the small hours, an act of petty vengeance occurred, setting the stage for an outcry that would transform the entire approach to children's art in Riverbend Grove, and ironically lead to a bigger, better solution far beyond Karen's control. At sunrise the next day, Laura Bryant and a handful of children arrived at the playground earlier than usual. They hoped to enjoy a crisp morning session of watercolor painting before the day grew hot. As they approached the area where they typically spread their large butcher paper, a sharp chemical smell hit them. Laura frowned, sniffing the air. "That's odd," she murmured. Her oldest daughter, Sarah, also wrinkled her nose. "Mom, it stinks." They drew closer, spotting a dark, oily patch on the grass. The children recoiled. One pointed at the muddled spot, where the grass seemed wet and discolored, a faint rainbow sheen swirling on the surface. Alarmed, Laura immediately told the kids to stay back. She crouched to inspect the soil, recognizing the pungent odor of paint thinner or some chemical. "Why is this here?" she wondered. The kids had never used oil-based paints, only water-based, non-toxic stuff. Plus, they always disposed of rinse water properly. A sudden chill crept over her as she realized this was no small spill. It reeked of deliberate dumping. Over the next half hour, more parents arrived, taking in the shocking sight. They roped off the area with caution tape from a caretaker's closet, preventing children from stepping on the contaminated patch. Kevin, a father with some environmental science background, tested the soil with a basic kit, confirming the presence of solvents. He shook his head in disbelief. "This is hazardous. If a kid touched it, or if it seeped deeper, we'd have real trouble." Word spread rapidly. Some parents suspected it was sabotage, though they hesitated to accuse. But a few quietly muttered that Karen Farnett had been complaining about the paint sessions. Could she have done this? The caretaker of the playground, a mild retiree, insisted he had no chemicals like that. The children's group used only safe, kid-friendly paints. So who else had reason to pour toxic paint water here? Laura called the local environmental services hotline. They advised them to keep kids away and arrange a proper cleanup. The caretaker roped off a section of the grass, posted signs reading, "Danger, chemical spillage." Meanwhile, parents felt outraged. If this was sabotage, it had escalated from petty complaints to endangering children's health. In the swirl of confusion and anger, Henry Martin, an older neighbor who'd occasionally dropped by to watch the kids paint, walked over. He found the upset crowd, stepping cautiously with his cane. He listened to the story, eyebrows knitting in concern. "Somebody poured paint thinner? That's insane. We have to figure out who." That same morning, the caretaker told the HOA board about the incident. A few board members arrived to see the contaminated patch, wearing anxious expressions. They recognized the potential liability if children were harmed. They roped it off further, scheduling a professional environmental cleanup. Farnett arrived later, feigning shock. "My goodness, who would do such a thing?" she asked in a tense voice. Parents who saw her approach offered cold stares. Some believed she was behind it. Others said nothing, lacking proof. Farnett maintained an air of pious indignation. Surely it was an accident, she told them. But they eyed her suspiciously. The entire fiasco left the children's arts circle homeless. Chestnut Corner was no longer safe for painting with that chemical-laced patch near the usual site. Though furious, Laura and the other parents resolved to keep their kids out of harm's way. But where to hold their beloved painting sessions? Some suggested using private backyards, though that lacked the communal vibe. Others said maybe the kids could do it indoors. But the HOA had too many restrictions on using community halls for messy activities. As they mulled solutions, a spark of an idea emerged. What if they built a dedicated structure for art, placed far from Farnett's meddling, ensuring it had safe disposal methods for paint water? Some parents recalled that the edge of the neighborhood had a vacant lot designated for future amenities. Perhaps they could transform it into a new art pavilion. Upwind from Farnett's home, ensuring she had no grounds to intrude. Hope rose in the group, mixing with anger. They vowed not to let one malicious act quash their children's creative space. They'd rally the community to build something bigger, safer, and more officially recognized. An answer that Farnett couldn't sabotage, ironically born from her petty attempt to scare them off. Sitting around a dining table that evening, a core group of parents debated how to proceed. Laura Bryant, Kevin, the environmentally savvy dad, Henry Martin, and a few others had gathered to strategize. Kevin spread out the HOA's official map of Riverbend Grove. He pointed to a small green space at the far edge, labeled Potential Future Playground Expansion. "This area is fairly unused right now," Kevin said. "The HOA might let us repurpose it, maybe build a simple open-air pavilion for kids to do art. We can add wash basins or a sink with proper disposal of paint water. That way we never cause any litter or residue." Henry, leaning on his cane, nodded. This portion is well away from Farnett's house, so she can't claim it's an eyesore in front of her place. And we can ensure it's official, going through the right channels. Laura's eyes sparkled with determination. Yes, we can pitch it as a new community feature, an art pavilion for kids, seniors, or anyone who wants to do crafts outdoors. We can even mention how it addresses paint disposal concerns. Maybe the HOA board will see it as a net benefit. Of course, the challenge lay in obtaining board approval, especially if Farnett opposed it. But parents believed they had moral high ground. Farnett's sabotage had forced them from Chestnut Corner. They had an environmental reason, wanting safe disposal methods. Possibly, the rest of the board would side with them. They began drafting a proposal. Kevin drew up a rudimentary blueprint for a wooden pavilion, maybe 20 feet by 20 feet, with open sides for ventilation, a pitched roof to shield from rain, plus a small locked cabinet for art supplies. They'd add a sink connected to the existing water line, ensuring leftover paint water was captured in a holding container for proper disposal. Laura typed up a bullet point list. Community benefit, a dedicated, safe space for children's creativity. Environmental stewardship, proper disposal system for all paint water, preventing any hazard. Mitigating past incidents, offering an alternative site after the contamination at Chestnut Corner. Neighborhood unity, a positive project encouraging resident involvement. They reasoned that if Farnett tried to block it, she'd appear to be preventing a safer, well-organized solution for kids. The rest of the board might overrule her. Henry volunteered to speak passionately at the next board meeting, sharing how irresponsible dumping of toxic water had threatened children. He'd highlight how the pavilion would eliminate that risk. As excitement grew, the group realized building a pavilion wouldn't be cheap. They'd need funds. Some suggested a fundraiser, soliciting donations from neighbors, local businesses, or even small grants. The caretaker, upon hearing the plan, promised to help with labor. A local hardware store offered discounted materials if they got official approval. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood's social media and informal coffee chats. Many parents volunteered to pitch in. Even older couples without kids expressed support, seeing it as a beneficial amenity. A few residents with contracting skills offered to supervise construction if the board gave the green light. Meanwhile, Farnett sensed the tide shifting again. She overheard talk of the art pavilion, realized she was being circumvented. Furious that her sabotage spurred such a grand project, she tried quietly lobbying board members to deny the proposal, claiming it would encourage unregulated, messy activities. But the rest of the board recognized the negative PR if they quashed a positive solution after a chemical dumping incident. So, the stage was set for the next HOA meeting, where the official pavilion proposal would face either acceptance or a new wave of Farnett's interference. Yet the parents felt momentum on their side, fueled by righteous indignation and the allure of providing a safe, vibrant space for children's creativity. A week later, the Riverbend Grove HOA assembled in the community hall for its monthly meeting. Turnout was larger than usual. Word had spread that the parents' group would present their art pavilion plan. Residents who typically stayed home came to show solidarity or out of curiosity. The hall buzzed with subdued anticipation. At the front sat the 5-member board, with Farnett occupying a central seat, pen tapping restlessly. The board president, Charles Murdoch, called the meeting to order. After dealing with mundane topics, budget updates, landscaping schedules, he introduced the main agenda, the parents' proposal for an art pavilion in the southwestern green space. Laura Bryant and Kevin stepped forward, distributing copies of the blueprint and the bullet point rationale. Kevin explained the environmental rationale. We want a dedicated sink or container to collect any leftover paint water, ensuring it's never dumped outdoors. No chance for contamination, no chance for random sabotage. The last phrase carried pointed significance. Farnett stiffened. Laura described the community benefit. We can schedule open art sessions for children, seniors, or families. No more paint near Chestnut Corner. Instead, we create a single area, well managed. It fosters creativity, keeps the rest of the park pristine, and eliminates any concerns about water disposal. Henry Martin added a gentle but impactful note. After what happened with the toxic paint water poured near the playground, we realized kids deserve better protection. This pavilion is a constructive response, turning a negative act into a permanent positive. I hope we can unify around it. A hush followed. Applause broke out from some in the audience. Farnett cleared her throat, seizing the microphone. Her tone was clipped. While I understand the desire for an art space, we must consider potential downsides. Who's funding this structure? Will it meet design standards? Could it become an eyesore or a magnet for noise? Kevin responded patiently. We plan to raise funds or use volunteer labor. The building design will match the community's style guidelines. We'll manage noise by scheduling sessions at appropriate times. And it's well away from main roads or residences, so minimal disturbance. Farnett pressed on. There's also a risk that it'll become cluttered with half-finished projects or that paint spills will mar the pavilion. Who ensures it remains tidy? Laura calmly explained. We'll have a small volunteer committee to maintain it. We'll lock supplies in a cabinet, require sign-outs for use. We want it neat. No one benefits from disorder. The board members exchanged glances. Farnett obviously disliked the project, but the parents seemed to have every detail covered. The next few minutes saw open discussion from the floor. Neighbors praised the plan's creativity, calling it a wonderful alternative to random painting at the old playground. Some pointed out it prevented a future chemical hazard by centralizing supplies and disposal. Realizing Farnett's protests were overshadowed, the board president signaled for a vote. Farnett tried one last argument. We should table this for months while we gather more data. This is too hasty. But the board was ready. They recognized the moral impetus after the sabotage. They wanted a constructive resolution. In a decisive tally, the board voted 4-1 to approve the concept of the art pavilion. Farnett alone dissented. The hall erupted in applause. Some watchers said Farnett's face reddened with frustration. The parents, beaming, promised to coordinate with the board on final design touches. Walking out of the hall that night, Henry patted Laura's shoulder. We did it. A real solution, he said softly, cane tapping the ground. Laura nodded, tears brimming at the corners of her eyes. They turned an act of cruelty into impetus for a better future. Farnett retreated to her car, fuming. She had lost again. Her toxic water scheme had ironically catalyzed a bigger, more official setup for the children's art activities, placed beyond her immediate control. She told herself she'd watch the project like a hawk, waiting for any slip-up. But the momentum was unstoppable. The entire neighborhood was behind the pavilion, a shining example of using adversity to build something stronger. With the board's official nod, work on the art pavilion began in earnest. Parents and volunteers coordinated a timeline, raising funds through small yard sales, bake sales, and online donations. A local hardware store, hearing the heartwarming story, donated some lumber at cost, while an eco-friendly paint brand offered discounted coatings for the pavilion's trim. Construction commenced on a mild summer morning. Henry Martin, though not physically robust, insisted on being present, leaning on his cane, offering moral support. Younger folks, Kevin, some other dads, and a local handyman, measured out the foundation. They sank sturdy wooden posts, forming the skeleton of the open-air structure. Over the next few weekends, they added a pitched roof, half-walls, and a wide entryway. Neighbor kids watched eagerly, excited at glimpses of the pavilion taking shape. Some decorated the wooden beams with small painted handprints before the final protective coat. The concept of community art space literally embedded in the building. Rita, an environmentally conscious neighbor, coordinated with the local waste management department to install a small sealed disposal unit near the pavilion, allowing for safe collection of leftover paint water. The caretaker from Chestnut Corner helped dig a drainage line leading to a specialized container, ensuring no chemicals seeped into the soil. Volunteers also hammered out a simple code of conduct. Keep the pavilion tidy, store materials properly, respect quiet hours in the evening. Throughout the process, Farnett lurked. She occasionally approached the site, arms crossed, scanning for code violations, like suspicious nails or unapproved roofing colors. But the parents had meticulously followed the board-approved plan. Farnett found no legitimate grounds to halt construction, forced to watch the pavilion rise. Over about a month, the structure reached completion. Painted in soft pastel tones, approved by the board, it sported cheerful rainbow trim along the eaves, subtle enough not to violate any color uniformity rule, yet lively enough to reflect its artistic purpose. Inside, Wide tables sat ready for painting or crafting. A small locked cabinet stored brushes, paints, aprons. A posted sign read, Riverbend Grove Art Pavilion. Welcome. Please enjoy creative activities. Dispose of water properly in the sealed unit. Keep our space clean and bright. On the day of the pavilion's grand unveiling, families gathered in the new space. Children squealed with delight, brandishing fresh painting sets. Henry Martin stood near the entrance, cane in hand, gazing at the bright interior. He felt a lump in his throat, recalling how a vile act of dumping toxic water had led, ironically, to this official structure for safe art. The unveiling turned into an impromptu celebration. Parents brought homemade snacks. Older kids helped younger ones with painting. The caretaker gave a small speech, praising the resilience of the neighborhood. Some residents from other communities even visited, marveling at how this overcame sabotage with positivity. Karen Farnett did not attend. Word had it she was busy that day. Some suspected she couldn't bear to witness the successful outcome of her own sabotage. But the rest of the board showed up, congratulating the parents on creating a well-managed, valuable addition to Riverbend Grove's amenities. In a short ceremony, Kevin and Laura thanked everyone, singled out Henry for inspiring them to not let intimidation quell children's creativity. Applause erupted. Henry simply grinned, shoulders trembling with emotion. Sometimes adversity can push us to build something we never imagined, he said quietly, voice catching. Thus, the new art pavilion became a symbol of how, even when an HOA Karen stooped to polluting a child's play area, the community could rise above, forging a safer, more vibrant space than ever before. In the weeks following the art pavilion's opening, Riverbend Grove's children's art sessions transitioned seamlessly to their new home. No longer did they gather at the now-tainted corner of Chestnut Playground. Instead, they migrated to the bright, airy shelter on the southwestern edge, with broad wooden tables and plenty of supply cabinets. Parents marveled at how well the system worked. The sealed disposal unit allowed them to pour any leftover paint water into a specialized container, ensuring no chemical residue escaped into the environment. The caretaker arranged for monthly pickup by a local hazardous waste service, eliminating concerns about paint water in the open. Meanwhile, the kids adored the pavilion's lively atmosphere, each day adding new sketches or pinned drawings to the soft cork panels along the half-walls. Soon, the pavilion became a hub not just for children's painting, but also for adult craft nights, occasional paint and sip gatherings, and senior daytimes where older folks crocheted or practiced watercolor. Henry Martin sometimes joined these gatherings, smiling at the wide age range. We never had anything like this before, he mused, leaning on his cane. Ironically, all thanks to Farnett's meddling. The broader community recognized the art pavilion as a success story. The HOA, wanting to highlight a positive development, showcased it in their monthly newsletter. The board president wrote, Riverbend Grove's new art pavilion demonstrates how our neighbors can collaborate to foster creativity. We applaud the parents who champion safety and environmental responsibility. Of course, Farnett's name was absent from the article. Privately, she still bristled, claiming the structure was unnecessary or too colorful, but she had no official recourse. She tried complaining about noise from the pavilion, but the parents abided by posted quiet hours, leaving Farnett's complaint baseless. Defeated, she mostly retreated from the spotlight, letting the new reality stand. One afternoon, an environmental advocacy group, hearing of the pavilion's safe paint disposal, visited to do a small educational session. They praised the neighborhood for adopting best practices, referencing how easy it was to handle leftover paint responsibly if communities planned for it. The kids learned about proper disposal, how chemicals could harm water supplies, and the difference between safe water-based paints and more toxic oil-based ones. The irony that Farnett's initial toxic dump had triggered this environmental enlightenment was lost on few. In time, the fiasco faded into local lore, a cautionary tale about sabotage fueling better solutions. People occasionally joke that Farnett should have realized the more you push, the bigger the blowback. Meanwhile, the children thrived in their new environment, forging imaginative projects with less fear of sabotage or fiasco. And Henry, the gentle older neighbor, felt renewed joy seeing the children color the world around them. We overcame a dark moment, he'd reflect. Sometimes, that's how the best ideas bloom, out of a harsh attempt to stifle them. With the art pavilion firmly established, life in Riverbend Grove found a calmer equilibrium. The swirling controversy that followed the toxic paint water incident subsided, replaced by an enduring sense of community pride. Once a source of tension, the children's art gatherings now took place under the protective roof of the pavilion, far from Farnett's watchful eyes. Farnett, for her part, drifted into the background. While she retained her position on the HOA board, her proposals garnered less interest. If she voiced a complaint, like about the unapproved shade of a front door wreath, the board or neighbors politely reminded her that the association valued communal well-being over nitpicking. The entire environment shifted toward a more balanced approach, focusing on real issues rather than petty rule enforcement. Though Farnett tried occasionally to reassert herself with another compliance crackdown, residents were less fearful. The memory of her sabotage lingered, and any heavy-handed attempt at enforcement risked reigniting suspicion that she had poured the paint thinner. She never admitted guilt, but the rumor was strong enough that no one trusted her moral high ground. One day, Farnett ambled by the southwestern area, eyeing the bustling scene at the art pavilion. Parents had scheduled a creative carnival, featuring local artists giving demos, children painting side by side, and seniors crocheting ornaments. Farnett hesitated at the perimeter, tension flickering in her posture. She saw the swirl of bright colors, the carefree interactions. She might have scowled, but it was overshadowed by a sense of futility. No bylaw can ban a place brimming with positivity. She turned and walked away, unseen by most. A pang of bitterness twisted in her chest. She recognized she'd lost, not just the battle over children's painting, but the broader war for total compliance control. The community had discovered that their combined voices could overcome petty tyranny. Meanwhile, in a quieter corner of the pavilion, Henry Martin guided a small group of kids in painting gentle landscapes. He told them about the wonders of nature, how each color could be layered to create depth. The kids listened, enthralled, occasionally glancing at the cane that had become a fixture of Henry's daily presence. To them, Henry was a wise grandfather figure, a symbol of the victory over Farnett's hostility. Rumors arose that Farnett was considering moving away or stepping down from the board, but nothing materialized. Instead, she remained in Riverbend Grove, watching from a distance as the neighborhood carried on without the friction she once provided. The new normal felt healthier, more trusting. Freed from the overshadowing fear of Karen's random crackdowns, families breathed easier and found creative ways to enjoy communal spaces. Though Farnett's influence dwindled, the specter of her sabotage served as a reminder. Petty cruelty can spark bigger transformations. Without her initial, shocking dump of paint water, the art pavilion might never have existed. The children's art circle might have remained small and precarious. Instead, it blossomed into an institutional presence that enriched everyone's lives. With each passing season, the art pavilion became a living testament to Riverbend Grove's capacity for resilience. Over time, expansions were added. A small locked closet for musical instruments, a bright mural on one interior wall depicting children painting, guided by references to local flora. The caretaker integrated this safe disposal system for all kinds of craft byproducts, not just paint. Local environmental authorities praised the HOA for adopting best practices in communal art disposal. An ironic note, given Farnett's original sabotage. The kids continued to produce joyous creations, often hosting mini art shows for parents. Their confidence soared, as did community bonds. People discovered they could gather for more than painting. Some used the pavilion for reading clubs, small potlucks, or even yoga sessions. The flexible design accommodated everything. The entire neighborhood truly embraced it as their pavilion, a place free from fear or petty rules. Henry Martin remained a beloved figure, strolling over most mornings to greet the families or quietly paint his own scenes. Though his cane was still a necessity, it no longer seemed a source of shame or target. Instead, it reminded neighbors of how a single adversity had sparked a chain reaction of creativity. On a warm spring day, exactly 1 year after the toxic water incident, the parents organized a colorful remembrance event. They invited the local environmental group that had advised them, unveiling a new plaque dedicated to all who believe in turning negativity into vibrant art. The plaque briefly described how sabotage at the old playground site led to the building of the Pavilion, celebrating the unstoppable spirit of neighborly goodwill. The ceremony concluded with children releasing biodegradable confetti into the air, a swirl of color drifting on the breeze, signifying triumph over a once bleak moment. Though Farnett was not present, no one missed her. The rest of the HOA board, including the caretaker, stood by beaming, some wiping away tears at the heartfelt significance of the day. Henry gave a short speech, voice trembling with gratitude. When selfishness rears its head, sometimes it pushes us to build something better. This pavilion is for everyone, always. Applause thundered. In the end, the memory of Karen Farnett's attempt to label the children's painting as a hazard and to sabotage the playground with toxic paint water became a footnote, albeit a crucial one. Without her cruelty, the impetus for the art pavilion might never have existed. The entire block recognized this paradox. As a result, they adopted a perspective that even in the darkest acts, seeds of collaboration can bloom as long as people stand together. Thus, Riverbend Grove emerged from the ordeal more unified, more creative, and more compassionate. In the final analysis, Farnett's bitter impetus ironically propelled the neighborhood to establish a grand new feature that championed art, safety, and environmental care, a testament to how adversity can spawn beauty and unity, overshadowing the malicious intent that once threatened to poison a child's precious space.